To mark today being my first official video where I turned 17, what better way to celebrate than with a video no one wanted? You all were hoping for me to upload that one video I hyped, but you can't see it anymore, so it's sad, I know. Look, I'm sorry, but I have problems. Like, my phone has problems, my mom wants to buy me a new one, so maybe someday she will, maybe it'll get better, but for now, I'm just having issues. But anyway, I'll go ahead and do this video. You ever wanted to see my favorite movie per each year? Well, I'm not going to show you that. Instead, what I'm going to show you is my favorite movie per each year, starting with 1980 and ending with 2004. 2004, the year before I was born. I had done a video a while ago on my favorite movie per year, starting with the day I was born, the year I was born. So I figured I'd go farther back before I was born, back before I existed, back to where people think I don't need to be looking at those movies because I never existed, but maybe I wanted to. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite movie per each year, starting with 1980 and up to all the way to 2004. Why are we starting with 1980? Because maybe I need to think time through. Because maybe I'm not all the way complete with every other movie from past before the 80s. Not that I haven't seen many movies before the 80s. Okay, it kind of is a case. But look, I'm not fully finished with what my favorite movie is per each year. There's so many missing slots. So we're just going to start from 1980 all the way up to 2004. And also remember, I'm going to be spending only 30 seconds for each thing for two reasons. One, you heard me talk about most of these. Most of these I've explained a bunch of times, so you don't really need to hear too much. And two, I really feel I'm very sensitive about how long my video can be. I really don't want it to deal with this kind of trouble that one video went through. So I'm just going to keep this at a minimum so I don't have to worry about that anymore. That said, let's start. The Empire Strikes Back I've talked about before a lot of times. It is still among one of my all-time favorite movie ever. This movie still holds that special place in my heart for having as much emotion and as much darkness that a Star Wars movie can get. I have such a love for Star Wars just from all the action and sci-fi there is, and to look at all of them, one of them has to be my favorite. And the one I chose was this one, for all the emotion and all the greatness it has to offer. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great movie. It focuses a lot on adventure. It's like the defining adventure movie. Well, one of the defining adventure movies. It pulls together so much. It's a Steven Spielberg classic. While I have crapped on the sequels, the original is always still a timeless hit. This movie will always be very fun with all the adventure and all the action you can get from Harrison Ford, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and all the above. What more can you ask for? There's E.T. as well. Another Steven Spielberg classic. E.T. the Extraterrestrial is a drama, a family film. It is a lot of stuff. I wouldn't call it one of my favorites ever, but E.T. is very great at putting emotion together. It is a very defining Spielberg film. I think I always would love E.T. just for how much it has to offer. I've already said it's my favorite of this year's, and you already know. Should be the best, but it is definitely my favorite. The final of the trilogy, Return of the Jedi, bringing the end to this adventure that these fellas gave us, we see the finale featuring the battle between Luke and Vader, who are now known as father and son, all the death that each other character goes through, all the emotion combined together to a great trilogy finale. This finale just works so well for me. I not a lot of people found it great back then, but I love it still. Who are you gonna call? Who knows? But Ghostbusters is just something else. This movie really can feel great for having the perfect amount of comedy mixed together with action you can actually take seriously. What I love about this movie, it takes some funny people and puts them in a comedy, but also a pretty serious action film. And it really feels satisfying seeing the stuff that happens between the characters. So you can feel both comedy and serious action at the same time. Back to the Future, a time travel adventure like no other. I don't know many other time travel movies, but I know this one will be the defining one always. Because this one, you travel back in time. You take an adventure, you go in a DeLorean, and you travel through the years that you will always look through. 1955 to 1985. The 80s was everything, and this movie proves it. Just all the fun a time travel can get. Back to the Future is everything. Stand By Me is a Stephen King book called The Body, with a movie made by Rob Reiner, bringing 4 kids on an amazing adventure, and I just seem to feel so satisfied too. All the interactions, the chemistry between these kids, all the fun little adventure we see these kids come across, just makes me feel so nice. Okay, I like to feel young. I like to see this kind of adventure be done by these kids. It just places a warm place in my heart, and always will. Predator is a great Arnold Schwarzenegger film. Arnold Schwarzenegger has some of the best action movies you can find, and this one is no exception. Predator, you see predators in a forest, you're in danger, because these predators are crazy. This is a crazy movie. You got horror, you got action, you got this dude who is just gonna fire at him. I swear, he's just so cool. My God, he is so cool. If I was a chick, I think I just can't stop looking about how cool he is. Then there's Bruce Willis in Die Hard. Not a lot of people thought he was gonna work for this movie, but he did, because he's also pretty cool. The coolness this movie has, jumping off of buildings that explode, fighting evil over a top building. It's just, all this happens in one big film. A lot of it feels like it's so much, yet it all works really well in just one movie. One movie puts all this great action together with a star you wouldn't expect to be so great. The sequel to the Back to the Future trilogy, Part 2 will give you the same good feels as Part 1 did. Part 2, they're at the future. And while it's not the future we are at now, it's not the 2015 we are now, it's a pretty nice 2015. They return home in a mess of events. More happens than just traveling to 2015. What I love about this movie, you don't get just a 2015 adventure. You got some serious awesome time travel adventures. These two just bring a lot of fun to me. Another Stephen King based book directed by Rob Reiner, Misery takes James Caan as a dude who is in trouble from Kathy Bates, a serial killer. It is insane. This movie has a lot of insane elements thrown to it. I think Misery just really feels chilling enough as it should. It's like The Shining with all of its snowy elements or whatever. And yes, I think Stephen King movies based off of Stephen King stuff, will be just as great. While Beauty and the Beast is probably not something most people consider to be the best of this year, I consider it my favorite of this year because it really defines the genre it goes for. No, not animation, nor romance. Romance is something that this movie really seems to put together well. I feel like everything I can know about a romance movie can be thrown to this movie without me complaining. I'll just enjoy the music, the animation, and the chemistry characters can have without thinking about other things like this movie could have become, if you know what I mean. And same with Aladdin. Yeah, 2 animated Disney films in a row. Am I crazy? Maybe. But this movie's great too because, again, it has great characters. If the characters weren't as great, maybe this wouldn't be as great. But the way the characters are done in this film, it's like the characters is what makes it a great movie. You can get some interesting characters like our lead, some funny characters like, of course, the genie, and some pretty amazing songs and animation to go along with the idea. Disney just won't stop doing these awesome animated films this year. Okay, let's look at Steven Spielberg again. Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park can just really give you the kind of feels you want. The CGI in this movie is outstanding. Even today, you can look at the CGI as perfect, because it is. And even with the great CGI, it doesn't make you have to ignore some of the other great stuff there is, because there's still lots of great adventure and seriousness thrown at us. It's scary, it's awesome, it's dinosaur loving. Forrest Gump has emotion like no other. Tom Hanks being my all-time favorite actor, how could this movie work so well? It just does. With a person I love so much, playing a character I love so much, going through an entire century of events, being his own sensitive, nice self. This man is just so likable. They could not have made a more likable man. This guy wasn't as likable, maybe this movie would have fought here, but it's just so likable. It just makes this movie so great. Speaking of Tom Hanks, here's the Toy Story movie, an animated masterpiece. Toy Story, you can just see all here. Toy Story will be animation you will never see before. the CG animation that was introduced to the film big screen, it's awesome. And even, again, the CGI doesn't distract, because the story is great too. I love all the kid stuff. It really just makes you feel like a kid when you're watching this movie. I watched this so much as a kid. Looking back at it as an adult just feels so satisfying. Fargo. The Coen brothers are home to some wacky stuff, but Fargo can really give you that kind of feel you're ready for. Fargo is a murder mystery with a lot of great stuff thrown into it. Murder mysteries can be fun, and Fargo really does show how much fun it can be. So yep, you got a murder mystery, what can you do? Well, you gotta find our main cop lead and just see all the elements you can get. It can be scary, and it can still be watchable. Another fun romance you will always remember, Titanic will give you a romance on an actual event. It takes a new story that people come up with, and they put it into an actual event. That's something that's really nice seeing. Just seeing an actual event take place in a film for a long movie with an extra moment to add to emotion. I like that, adding a new emotion to an already emotional moment. Something you really just gotta see more of these great movies. The Truman Show, well, I really don't know what else to say. Jim Carrey is always known for comedy, some of the funniest stuff ever, but with Truman Show, it's more serious. Still some funny with Jim Carrey, obviously, but you get a serious thing, because the Truman Show focuses on a live show being done with some crazy stuff he goes through. It is confusing, but still fun. It's still a nice movie to watch. If you're tired of Jim Carrey's comedy, which is hard, this is for you. Toy Story 2, the sequel to the beloved Toy Story. Toy Story 2 can be just as exciting when you're ready to see the Toy Story fellas back again in another adventure. That's just as enjoyable as the first. More childhood memories can flow into me with this movie. While I don't really think it's better than Toy Story 1, I personally think Toy Story 1 is still the second best. Toy Story 2 can work as well. It's the third best. It's still great. So even though it's not as great, it's still really great. Now let's look at Tom Hanks once more with Castaway. You ever wanted to see a movie where you can cry over someone losing their loved one being a volleyball? That's Castaway for you. I think Tom Hanks will always be the right choice for some great roles, when he can make some dumb things actually have emotion to them. That's just what you can love about Castaway. A moment of being stranded will have you into some big adventures that are honestly my favorite, but are still really great. The Lord of the Rings franchise begins with Fellowship. Still my top 3 of all-time favorites. Well, Fellowship begins this trilogy with our heroes beginning their adventure. An adventure that will be as bizarre, but still as epic as you could ever imagine. You got your books set to the big screen. Let's begin our adventure with the Fellowship of the Ring. Let's start our quest and see how far it can go from there. Now we're at the Two Towers, where we see Gandalf the White, Saruman, and the ever-displeasing Gollum, who will all be a big task to deal with through this adventure that continues. But with the help and all of the respect done, the adventure can still continue. They can all still live on. I think even with some crazy stuff like that, they will still continue their adventure and hope it will get somewhere. Even though I don't like it as much, it's still great. And now we conclude our adventure. The Return of the King is my favorite out of all of them. So yep, it's my top 3 of all my favorite movies ever. And believe me, there's still a good reason. The Return of the King is, what else? The Return of the King. The King returns, better than ever. A return of a king that you'll just always love. I'll love these trilogies so much, and this one will just defy it the best. I love it. And now let's conclude this adventure with The Incredibles. Incredibles is an animated movie. It's weird to call this my favorite, but out of all the films I've seen, I think Incredibles works great. Your superhero adventure is put in an animated Pixar film that has just as much action that you could expect from a normal superhero movie, but it's a Pixar film, which makes it even the more epic. Epic animated films will always look like something like this. You get my point, right? I have a love for these movies, so there's my point. I I could edit this sometime in the future, but now that I'm 17, I just want to share all my favorite movies I've seen in my other years before I start checking out some more mature films. So get ready, because I'm about to see some of those mature, R-rated films. You name it. Godfather, Shawshank, Pulp Fiction, Goodfellas, Saving Private Ryan, The Green Mile. Let's see what else is there. Wolf of Wall Street, of course. There's a lot of great ones. There's I have to count. Hold on, let me look at my list. Let's see. Schindler's List. There's Schindler's List. There's what's the name of that? What's that one called again? Oh yeah. And it's a lot. I don't really have much to say right now.